too young, die too young. 100 miles per hour might crash, cause good die young. But here I come, push it to the limit, I can't go no more. Red light, no way, I'm coming back home. Long dirt road all on my own. I'ma be the greatest, write my name in the stone. Write my name in the stone. Yeah, I'm coming back home. Yeah, I'm coming back home. Write my name in the stone. Cause I'm coming back home. Cause I'm coming back home. I'm coming back home. I'm coming back home. Y'all coming back home. Y'all coming back home. I'm coming back home. Y'all coming back. Push it to the limit, I can't go no more. Red light, no way, I'm coming back home. Long dirt road all on my own. I'ma be the greatest, write my name in the stone. Write my name in the stone. Yeah, I'm coming back home. Yeah, I'm coming back home. Write my name in the stone. Cause I'm coming back home. Cause I'm coming back home. Write my name in the stone. Cause I'm coming back home. Yeah, I'm coming back home.
You don't know what is it we're saying. You don't know, you don't care. All you know is honey that you're faking. You don't know, you don't care. We're all having fun, bathing in the sun. We're all building castles, castles in the sand. We're having fun, we're having fun.
You don't know, what is it we're hiding? You don't know, it's not fair. All you know is, darling, that we're faking. You don't know, it's not fair. We're all having fun, bathing in the sun. We're all building castles, castles in the sand. We're having fun, we're having fun.
Welcome to this conversation on future food cultures. My name is Michele Catanzaro. I'm a physicist and a science journalist. I will moderate this event. This is the third of a series of conversation on metabolic engineering that has been promoted by the European project Synbio4flav. As you've seen, we've used a word in the title, the future food cultures. Culture is a word that is very polysemic, very open. It can refer to culture in the common understanding of the word, but it can also refer to agriculture, microbial culture, what is cultured, what is cultivated, and we really willingly kept it open because we want this conversation to be as open as possible. It's an exercise of projection, an exercise of imagining how the future of food will be, and let's say what will be considered as cultured or cultivated in 10 or 50 years from now may be very different from what we think now. In fact, this change, let's say, in food is already happening under our eyes. New food is already appearing, and this change is driven strongly by biotechnology, by science, by research. And in order to approach such a big challenge of imagining the future, we have put together a very interesting blend of panelists. I will introduce them later, but I can already tell you that based on the conversation I've had with them, they have a lot of interesting things to tell, and they come from different backgrounds. So we really want to have a large perspective from the background of research, of applied science, companies, and also from the background of regulation. As I told at the beginning, this event is promoted by the European project Synbio4flav that explores the potential of microbial communities for the production of complex chemicals, in particular flavonoids, which are naturally produced by plants. And the idea is exploring the potential of designed bacteria, let's say, to produce alternative sources of future food that are sustainable, healthy, tasty, etc. So it has a lot to do with the topic of this debate. We will, in fact, keep a special focus on what is called precision fermentation. So fermentation is something that is as old as humanity, we can say, or very, very old. And I've written a list of things that include it, from smoked ham, sausages, cheese, yogurt, beer, wine, cider, picked vegetables, a lot of things that are part of our normal diet. So what we are witnessing is really a new phase in this very old story in which designed bacteria have a role to play in this story. I also remind you that this is the third, as I mentioned, of a series of conversation, and that the previous ones, in particular the last one, for example, was called Towards a New Partnership with Nature, Synthetic Biology for a Broken Planet, which happened in Madrid. They are all recorded. This one is also being streamed and recorded, and they will be available for to check them in the future. Okay, so now let me introduce the speakers. After introducing them, I will ask to each one of them a first question, just to have a short introduction to explain who they are and what their work is. But first of all, I would like to start with Maya Bendifala, co-founder of Nutropy, here at my left, together with Nathalie Roland. Nutropy is a startup based in Paris that engages in microbial production of milk ingredients, engaging in large-scale production of cheese alternatives, merging precision fermentation and cheese-making traditions. Maya is a biochemist by training and worked in biotechnology in the US and in France. Then we have Francesco Visioli, a professor of human nutrition at the University of Padova in Italy. His research is really wide, and it concerns, among other topics, polyphenols as related to atherosclerosis and cardiovascular disease. And then we have Anna Merino, a senior regulatory strategist at Atova Regulatory Consulting, founded by Anna Lester. This consulting offers regulatory scientific support during product development to achieve regulatory approval in the European Union and in other global markets for novel foods. Anna Merino is a veterinarian, and she's leading project for the approval of microbial products and ingredients produced in precision fermentation. So, as I announced before, really exciting panel. So first of all, let's start with Maya. Could you tell us simply what does your company do, and also a little bit about the philosophy, what's behind that. 3 minutes just for you, first introduction.
Great. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for having me here. So Nutri is a company based in France, located just outside of Paris. We are producing milk ingredients through precision fermentation in order to enable dairy companies to decarbonize their cheese production. So today, we all know that cheese is a very loved product, and yet the alternatives so far have not been satisfactory. We have a penetration of the plant-based cheese into the cheese market of only 1%. People are always looking for something that has a better sustainable profile that can be animal-free, but today we don't have the capacity in the plant-based world to provide these alternatives. So that's really where Nutri comes in. We're using microorganisms that we engineer in order to produce these milk ingredients that enable us to actually make cheese. So, for example, caseins, these are the majority protein found in milk, and they make cheese melt and stretch, and they give us the cheese experience that we're looking for. So Nutri, I would say, it really has the philosophy of trying to bring consumers looking for new products, bring dairy industrials looking to decarbonize their supply chain, towards the cheese experience that they have today and that they want to have in this next generation of cheese alternatives.
So really relevant to the topic of our conversation. Thanks a lot for this introduction. So Francesco, I know it's hard, but could you give us a landscape of your work and a little bit focusing especially on the topic of this panel?
So the topic, I think it's very interesting and it really pertains to my history of future foods. So I'm a pharmacologist by training, and in 1993, so 30 years ago, I was given a small polyphenol called hydroxytyrosol, extracted from extra virgin olive oil. Didn't know what to do with it. And then it was really difficult to dissolve. So I bought, my very first publication was with polyurethane, which I bought from Extra Synthèse. So I'm here after 30 years. Thanks to Extra Synthèse. I published in 1994 on polyurethane. And back then everyone was laughing at me because I was working in a pharmacology department in Milan, and everyone was studying statins, everything for cardiovascular disease, for Alzheimer. The word nutraceuticals did not exist, and everyone was just, you're studying flavonoids, you're studying polyphenols. The pharmaceutical industry had lots of money, huge amount of money. We didn't have any, or very little money. But then we got a European project in, I think, 1995 on olive meal wastewater. In Spanish, it's called alpecin. So when you produce olive oil, you throw away an enormous amount of polyphenols, enormous, tons. And back then, it was very easy to get a European project. You just had to write them. And so we got that project, and we found ways to recover these polyphenols. And since then, everyone started to follow. The whole field picked up. We unfortunately wasted a lot of time speaking of antioxidants. Now, the whole field of antioxidants. But we moved on with the inflammation. We did human studies. We were the first one. We published in the year 2000 to prove that olive oil polyphenols are absorbed by humans. I mean, now, sounds like the techniques were just ridiculous if you think about it. But when I hear of future foods, again, everyone was really skeptical back then. You study polyphenols, you study flavonoids. What is it? You should study simvastatin. And I thought, wait and see. And so I think when I hear of things like this, that's the future. Okay, we should not be scared. We should not laugh at anyone who does different things. And I'm really happy to be here today. I think it's a very beautiful idea of trying to produce something that is very natural, like flavonoids, through different ways. Mm-hmm. And that I think it's a great idea.
Thanks for that perspective, because always when talking about the future, one can, there is this dimension of, who knows, whatever. Exactly. And having had this experience, of how things are perceived and how the perception change regarding food is really, really valuable and interesting. Anna Merino, as a veterinary by education, what drove you to devote yourself to these regulatory issues?
Yeah, well, but part of my education is actually food-related, hygiene, technology, and safety, but actually studying in regulatory was just pure chance. I just started working on animal nutrition, feed additive registration, and then I got in contact with all these microbial-derived products like enzymes, amino acids. There's like a tremendous amount of feed additives actually produced by precision fermentation. And then I started again being a bit more in contact with the food side of it. So food enzymes, again, a lot of them produced by precision fermentation, novel foods. And then I don't know, I start realizing that it does have like some sort of harmonization from a regulatory point of view, like a microbial characterization, etc. So you start seeing the connection between the different food categories, and that's interesting. And yeah, and recently in Atoba, we start focusing just on alternative proteins and food tech, which is really interesting, and again, it's a great opportunity to be in contact with innovators such as Maya and so many others that they are doing really, as you say, like things that could sound crazy some years ago, and now they're a reality. Like again, dairy produced by microbes, cultivated meat or seafood, fungal biomass is algae extract. So, and the applications and the potential is actually overwhelming if you, think about it. So, yeah, basically.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Yeah, yesterday I must say we had a conversation on the topic, and I sort of lighted up because she opened up so much, Anna, the landscape of what I knew about alternative proteins. So, for example, I didn't know about fungi, etc. And in fact, I must say, as a journalist and as a reporter, in the last few years, food has definitely become a thing. You start to have, even specialized food sections, specialized food reporters. So I wanted to open the conversation, not, let's say, thinking about the trends, okay? The trends that you detect in, among people in the market, in consumer behaviors that are likely to shape this future food culture. Whoever wants now, feel free to have a, very relaxed and open conversation. What are the main trends you think that will shape the future of foods in your view?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. We're seeing a lot more. Today we pretty much only have plant-based as the alternatives to animal-based, but we're seeing many more plant-based products showing up, and not just in niche stores, but in large supermarkets, a wide variety of brands, wide variety of products. We're seeing more and more people add those products into their daily, their weekly regimen, and so that's really something that's been a significant shift, especially in France. Generally, France is one of the last places to have these new products show up. So I've been very happy to see this change. And I really think, part of it is, of course, making sure these products are good enough so that people continue to buy them. That's why, we're working on cheese, because we're not seeing that yet. But we're seeing more and more progress in terms of the types of products that are available and the quality in particular.
Okay, so one first trend, the emergence of all these meat alternatives or protein alternatives. Any other?
No, I forgot to thank a few people. The first one is Pope Clement VIII. So Pope Clement VIII, it's thanks to him if we drink coffee, because coffee was forbidden. There was no coffee here. Coffee originates from Ethiopia. So he was the first one who tasted coffee, said, wow, this is great. We cannot let pagans have this drink. So feel free to drink coffee. So thanks to the Pope, we are here. Also, I would like to thank Hernan Cortés, who brought tomato to Europe. If you go to Italy, you eat pizza. There was no pizza 500 years ago. There was no tomato, nothing, zero. There was no sofrito.
How sad.
No sofrito, no tomato. So thank you, Hernan Cortés. Also, thank you, the Maya, who created cocoa. There was no cocoa here. Now it's famous German chocolate, Belgian chocolate. No, it's not famous. It's not traditional. Nothing. It did not exist 500 years ago. And the last people I want to thank were those who, about 10,000 years ago, domesticated cows, domesticated sheep, horses, and now we are domesticated microbes or yeast. So when I hear people saying, cultured meat, cultured milk, so that's the same phase that 500 years ago people did with tomatoes. We did not eat tomatoes. Tomatoes were used to as ornamental plants. Gentlemen were using to give tomatoes to the ladies. Now you bring flowers. Back then you brought tomatoes. You do it now, you're in trouble. But no one ate tomatoes. They thought they were poisonous. So, so if you say, these are produced by microbes, no, that's very stupid. I think we have a unique opportunity to engineer microbes, to engineer whatever we want, and domesticate them. And the pace of innovation is accelerating super rapidly. And this will be great for the environment. And again, if you are scared, think that 500 years ago, people were scared of tomatoes. Potatoes, thank you, Monsieur Parmentier. There were no potatoes in Europe, none, zero. So this Parmentier guy, I can't remember where he lived, but he planted potatoes in a field, and then he surrounded the field with armed guards, so the peasants thought that there was something very valuable there. He removed the guards at night, and the peasants stole tomatoes. And now we have French fries, we have pommes frites, we have Parmentier. Germany lives on tomato, on kartoffel. So I think, so if you go cultured milk, it's the same thing with potatoes 500 years ago. So don't be scared of the future. The future is there for us to use.
Great. So meat, let's say protein alternatives, innovation, and Anna, any trend that you would like to highlight that is likely to reshape the future, let's say?
Exactly. I 100% agree with what Maya said with the plant-based. It's crazy. We've seen the projection. I mean, we see how you can find vegan burgers in every menu now, or ordering a coffee with oat milk is not oddity anymore. And I think that's established even in France, which generally they're like the more reluctant to this type of products. Not like Italy and Spain in general have more acceptance. And I think it's exactly, we've seen what happened with plant-based, and I think we will see precision fermentation in the short future. I mean, in Europe we already have applications submitted to EFSA, and I mean, we can see, like in the States, they already have egg and dairy milk protein produced by precision fermentation and accessible in supermarkets and stuff. So I think it's not so far-fetched to start seeing vegan cheese made with dairy, or I mean, we don't need to think that far. And then, I think cultivated meat definitely is coming. Will take longer than precision fermentation, but
sooner or later.
It will. I mean,
it's also a sustainability issue. If you think about it, so the planet is growing, the population is growing, but there's something called Bennett's law, that people become more affluent and they eat more animal protein. So the whole population, the world population, is eating more animal protein more rapidly than the growth of the world population. We cannot sustain it. It's not me. It's not Greta Thunberg who says that. You do arithmetics. We cannot exploit the planet to grow animal protein. We need to find alternative ways. So there are companies who produce protein from the air. Maybe they will fail, maybe not. Or they produce oil from fermentation. Maybe they will fail, maybe not. But we cannot go on like this. It's not me who says that. I mean, I'm not an environmentalist. I don't care. But if you do the arithmetics, the world population, China is eating lots of meat. And if you let 1.5 billion people keep eating more and more and more meat, the richer they become, the more meat they eat. India will start eating meat and meat and meat. We cannot do that, so we need to find alternative ways. Either we stop, or we find alternative ways to grow animal protein.
This brings me, in fact, to the second thing I wanted to ask you. I've already answered, but I would like to hear also the other panelists, which is, I mean, we have started on a positive note on where, I mean, imagining the future, but then there are also, let's say, some urgent matters. So do you share the perception that the current food system, let's say an agricultural system, has issues like the ones that Francesco was pointing out? That is, there are aspects that are basically unsustainable not in the long run, in fact, in the short run. Would you agree with that analysis, and what aspects are more critical in your point of view?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. Yeah, I definitely agree. You know, it's like you said, it's mathematic. We don't have enough resources on this planet to feed everyone if we were to continue our current, system without changing it. Animals are not as efficient as, as plants or as microbes to produce protein. We're talking about an animal will need between 6 to 12 plant calories to produce one animal calorie. So there's a lot of loss. Certainly some of those plant calories are not able to be consumed by humans today, but a lot of them are. So today we need other ways, and microbes are very efficient and can be very easily transplanted in a wide variety of conditions. There are, like you mentioned, biomass. You can have other types of fermentation as well. There's not just precision fermentation. What we really started with the thinking of was the fact that people want to eat what they eat already. You talked about people wanting to eat these animal proteins. Yep. They don't, you talked about China. China has been consuming, tofu for a very long time. They don't want to eat tofu. They want to eat something that tastes like meat. They want to eat, if you are going to give a French person some soy cream, that's not going to work. They want cheese. Yep. So we need to find ways to provide people with, the food culture that they're used to having. So they can have those same cultural experiences and, say, okay, I'm eating meat, I'm eating dairy, I'm eating eggs, but, just with a different origin. And we mathematically, we need to find solutions and fast.
Anna, what do you think about?
Yeah, I think it's given at this time, I think it's pretty obvious that we all, or a majority of us, agree with that statement. I think it's, again, it's not a future projection, we're seeing it. And that added to the environmental or climate change uncertainty that makes it even more scary. So I think, for me, the conclusion is just having options to reduce the pressure we are having in current food production systems. So people is not going to force to eat something that they don't want to. So I think we just need to make the delicious and more sustainable food. So not everyone will choose to eat them, but some of them will, or at least try it. Or I mean, you don't need to do a complete shift on the diet. I think the whole idea of the healthier future is this coexistence. And I mean, the more people eat, I don't know, precision fermented cheese, the less people will eat traditional dairy. So I think it's just everything we can unload from the current pressure is positive. So it's as
And what about, let's start, let's say, from the basics. That is, what areas of science are more likely to provide, breakthroughs in this context? I'm thinking, of course, all the biotechnological thing, but maybe, for example, even information technology or this sort of thing may play a role. I mean, which are the areas of science to watch in terms of the likeliness of providing interesting contributions? Whoever wants, maybe Francesco or...
No, I think we should all come together. If we just focus on CRISPR-Cas9, it's a great thing, but it's limited. What are the effects of precision fermentation on the microbiota? That's a whole different field. And what are the effects on cholesterol, on dementia? I think we should all come together and integrate as many fields as possible, from the hardcore biochemists who go into the cell to just modify one single enzyme, and then you need toxicologists, super important. If a product is toxic, you cannot release it into the market, or allergenicity, or genotoxicity. Those are all different fields. And then the health effects, we produce more flavonoids. What for? So that's a whole different field, So some people study the cardiovascular system, some people study cancer, some people neurodegeneration, inflammation, immunity. I think it's a great opportunity to put engineers. You need to build a fermentator. I don't know how to do it. I have no idea. Maybe I have a great idea how to produce milk, but then what? So
Anna?
Yeah, no, basically just adding up on what you just said is, for example, a lot of these technologies, let's say cultivated meat or precision fermentation, precision fermentation has a history also in pharma and other industries, but let's say cultivated meat, one of the limitations now is scaling up and producing these bioreactors. to produce food, because one thing is on the at the lab scale, but as you probably well know, another different challenge is scaling up this to produce food. And the more people start eating these products and these ingredients, the more capacity we need to. There's many models. It can be decentralized, like and have more regional tiny bioreactors for food sovereignty, or it might be like a centralized. I think anything is, there's many options, but again, you need exactly engineers or people, logistics, or things like that you might not have think at the beginning to have the, to scale up.
We need to communicate to people that these products are safe, useful, they taste great, whatever. You know, they don't. Otherwise, they get scared. So yeah, we need a very interdisciplinary team.
Yeah.
And Maya, given that you are so close, let's say, to the market, have you noticed any area of research that is really likely to make an impact now or in the short run, let's say?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, in regarding cultivated meat, for example, we're definitely seeing more and more, I would say, B2B enablers. So these companies who are, you know, coming in and helping create an ecosystem to provide the hardware, to provide the software. You know, you mentioned, you know, bioinformatics, you know, having people come in and being able to analyze how these cells are growing, you know, whether we're talking about precision fermentation or cultivated meat. You know, there's, of course, a lot more technology that's been developed recently, you know, regarding sequencing, you know, and all the omics technology, understanding how these microbes work, you know, learning more about their metabolism to better control, you know, their production. You know, those are kind of more of the detailed aspects, but I fully agree with everything that you said, that this is incredibly multidisciplinary, and especially the comment you made about the communicators, because without consumers understanding the benefits, they may not think to purchase these products. They may not understand, okay, why is this important? Is this what I'm looking for, a product that's sustainable, that's animal-free? So it's really important to really keep a very large vision. And, you know, we talked about this recently. There was even a report from the Senate from France. They did an investigation into cultivated meat, and their conclusion was we need more research on this subject. And we've been fully supporting that for quite some time. We need researchers from many domains to investigate, you know, this new food culture. You know, we're talking about, you know, from consumer acceptance to, you know, the deep science.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'm taking notes about this report because it looks very interesting. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so I mean, we have been using words like precision fermentation, synthetic biology, metabolic engineering, maybe not for the public in the room, but for the broader public that will be the audience of and that is being the audience of this event. Can we be more precise about that? Whoever, I mean, what is precision fermentation, for example, and beyond clarifying the definition, if somebody has not understood it from what we have said until now, also what is its real potential? I mean, what is the role it has to play in this idea of reshaping food culture? Whoever wants can start.
She's the precision fermentation queen.
Yeah. Precision fermentation can have multiple definitions. You know, generally, the way that I see it is that I would say you have, you know, a known input and a known output. That's a very broad definition. What we use it for is to generally produce products that come from sources that are not sustainable or not exploitable. You know, when we're talking about, you know, extraction processes that are very difficult, when we're talking that come from plants, or animals that are very, you know, just very, that, you know, have all the environmental and ethical difficulties associated with them. So, you know, really using DNA, you know, in our case, to engineer the microbes, program them, give them a code, and say, please produce, you know, these proteins so that we can obtain, you know, this final product, whether it's a protein or not, you know, and then, you know, isolating those final products, and then using that as you know, a new ingredient, as a new product for food. So it's just we call them basically, you know, micro factories. It's just a new way of, you know, producing food. I mean, you know, in plants we don't necessarily master everything. It's very complex. Same with cows or other animals. And here we're just going into much more detail, saying we want this particular ingredient and that only.
And Francesco, Anna, I was wondering, I mean, we have, as reporters, we often hear about, you know, these new, shiny, promising technologies, and sometimes you get a bit suspicious, so why should we believe that this one has really a way to go, let's say? Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah. No, go. Because I meant to ask you if there is a legal frame for precision.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what actually.
We'll touch upon that.
I was going to add that that's the thing is like we have this idea that it's a brand new technology, and it is not. It's of course, it's a progression as everything. We just keep on building on the knowledge that is already available and optimizing and making it more sophisticated. But just focusing only on the food, on the regulatory food side of it is, we have so many food products that they are produced with this technology that is in the everyday food. I mean, for example, chemosine, like rennet protein that is critical to make cheese, that is being traditionally isolated from calves' stomach. Since the 90s, it's been produced by precision fermentation and is widely used in most of the cheese that we are eating.
From precision fermentation. So
many
before it was
years.
only from cow stomachs.
Yeah, that in terms of, talking about these topics, communicating about these topics, there is this typical example, which is insulin, which is not
exactly.
in food, it's in health. And for me, for example, it was a discovery. I didn't know that so much rennet came from precision fermentation already now. I mean, not in the future.
Exactly, and this one, because was one of the pioneers, like the original, but now if you see, like it's a database, is a list of approved, novel foods, additives. There's so many of microbial origin using this technology. I mean, oligosaccharides, the oligosaccharides in infant formula, they're produced by precision fermentation, salts, and not only talking about the food enzymes, that there are like a lot of them that they're produced with this. So it's just exploring the potential, and expanding the use, but it's not, and that's why I think we are going to see that in the short future, because it's not something new, and especially for the people working and developing this product, nor for regulators or risk assessment, which is key actually to bring these products to the market. I mean, they're really, really familiar with this.
Great. Francesco?
Insulin is a great example. I just want to throw in because it was the first recombinant drug developed by Genentech, and before that, insulin was extracted from pigs, from the pancreas of pigs. So if you ask people now, would you prefer insulin from a pig or recombinant? They will say recombinant after many years. So maybe in the future, if you tell them, would you prefer to kill a cow and have a steak or cultured meat? Maybe now they will say, no, I'm just going the natural way. But 30 years from now, who knows? Or 20 or 15 or cheese, the same thing, or milk, the same thing. So the other thing we might need, I forgot to mention that before, is politicians and economists, because I had conversations with dairy companies, and they're scared to death of you. They're scared to death. So maybe we should convince them that sooner or later we need to regulate the process of entering the market instead of wiping out the whole industry slowly. But I think we need to find political ways, economical ways to replace what we have with what we will have.
Just to comment on that, I mean, we are a B2B company, so we're in direct contact with dairy companies. They really see a lot of promise in what we're doing, in order to offer, a larger variety of products to their consumers. A lot of them have launched, plant-based brands that, like I said, have this very low market penetration, and so they just want to diversify. It's a business strategy. It's to reduce their risks if they can add on, a third type of raw material and provide, open up a new market. So they don't necessarily, I would say, they're not saying, okay, we're dropping milk once we have your solution, but just that now we can finally offer an alternative that's animal-free that will actually satisfy consumers and not stay in this glass ceiling of 1%.
Anna, you wanted to?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's very limited. If you see like big companies, traditionally dairy or meat products, they're investing, they're diversifying, they're supporting companies also developing these alternative products, because they know it's there, and it's not going to be you or us. I mean, it's going to coexist. I mean, you see exactly a lot of plant-based products are produced by really big companies that they, like a few years, probably it was not on their portfolio or their business plan, and now they're realizing that this is a reality. So they're, of course, they're investing on it and supporting it, and it's the same with them. Of course, these transitions, as everything, needs to be fair and just for everyone, and that doesn't mean that the dairy farmers are going to not be able to make a living as they've been traditional or agriculture, because at the end, all these raw materials are needed anyway for this new technology. You still need the substrate for the microbes or the biomass. You need all these molecules. Maybe you can adapt, and there's a lot of discussion also with the molecular agriculture. You can start, I don't know, there's also, I think these changes, they are transversal and they are holistic, and it's not that a company start producing dairy, vegan dairy cheese. Is that it just goes also like to the primary producers of the raw materials.
And I mean, a few questions ago, we mentioned about these big challenges. You know, for example, the Bennett's law. You mentioned the fact that there are limits to how much we can exploit the planet, of course. But I'm thinking about a lot of other issues from, you know, of course, emissions associated with agriculture, but also food waste, for example, which is another important challenge. So I was wondering how this whole, I mean, precision fermentation in particular, but the whole landscape of innovative food can tackle these problems, and whether it really can tackle them, because I mean these are major issues, and you know, convincing the Chinese that they have maybe to go out of this trend may not be easy, or convincing whoever. I mean, I'm not singling out China, of course. So I mean, what is the potential of these technologies to tackle these big global challenges, and how likely they are to give a real contribution, and not something, you know, only marginal for the rich, posh people that can afford them?
Just a quick comment on the environmental sustainability. So some of the life cycle analysis that have come out on precision fermentation proteins, when they're compared to animal proteins, we're talking about minus 90% of greenhouse gas emissions, you know, minus 60 or so percent energy, minus, you know, 80 or 90% water. So these are very significant. So even if we, you know, even if in the beginning we have, you know, a lower market penetration, just eating a little bit of these products compared to eating animal products will have a significant impact on, you know, let's say, on the environment for each person that eats them. So, you know, of course, within the industry, we're all trying to get even higher numbers. You know, reduce our energy consumption, reduce our water consumption. You know, bring down our greenhouse gas emissions. But the difference between what this technology can provide and what animals are responsible for today is already so flagrant.
Okay. Just a second before you go on, just a reminder, I didn't say it at the beginning, at the end of the moderated debate, there will be plenty of time for questions from the floor, so start thinking what you want to ask this great panel, because it will not be that frequent to have so many different point of views together, and it's proving to be quite interesting. Okay, so let's go on. Before we move to that part, let's go on to your thoughts on challenges.
Thinking of a waste thing, it's very interesting. You know, we always talk about circular economy, and so the waste. Again, the example I made at the beginning, I started with an extra synthase molecule. All my polyphenol career started with. And I also thought that back then there was no internet, you couldn't buy. So I had the catalog. I don't know how I found the catalog. So thank God I found the catalog, and I looked, and then you know, you had to write a letter and then send it to Extra Synthase, and they sent me all European. And that started the whole idea of recovering polyphenols from olive meal wastewater. And now what I'm doing, for example, also have a project in Spain where we do milk fat globule membranes. So when you produce milk, as you know, so when you have milk, it floats and it's cream. So you shake it and it becomes butter. What's left over is called buttermilk. In Spanish, it's called mazada. And that's full of phospholipids, and we throw them away. But if we find a way to recover them, we have a way to recover them. We can use them for cognitive decline, infant, nutrition. So if we stress waste, maybe using precision fermentation, using, for example, as a substrate waste product, that will even more increase the circular economy. Instead of throwing things away, we can use them to feed their microbes or the yeast, whatever, and that will even increase life cycle assessment, I think.
Yeah,
I was basically going to mention that because it's very interesting, and companies are starting to develop and look at these side streams or wastes or co-products, or things that they might not have a value in the food chain, or a lot of them are actually reused vegetable peels, husks from grains for animal feed, but a lot of those they are great substrates for fungi, for microbes, and this is like a way of revalorizing side streams and actually make it more circular. So
I understand the concept of precision fermentation, certainly with all these ideas that you have brought on the table, fits a lot, let's say matches a lot with all these global challenges. Then maybe the next thing is, I mean, it fits in principle, but then you have to bring this to reality. And this brings me to my next question, that is, for example, how rare, let's say, is your company? That is this just, a few random startups here and there? Maybe also, Anna, you have a landscape of what's happening, or is there really an emerging sector of companies that are likely to scale and to really produce something that has an impact on the market and not just, very niche, etc.? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean,
in a white fly or no?
No, in cultivated meat and precision fermentation combined, there are over 100 companies. When I say precision,
600. Like the Good Food, the Good Food Institute database. It's like the Good Food Institute. They have like wonderful materials.
They also have plant-based in there, so I don't know if.
Just cultivated and precision.
Well, I said over 100. So this is, I remember cultivated meat. We were just alone. We are getting close to 100 companies. Now we're seeing more of these B2B enablers. There again, when we think about. Cheese alone has over 1,000 varieties. So if we're thinking, there are, many, many different dairy producers, many different products. So if we're thinking about, kind of making an extension of our current food cultures, but, with products derived from precision fermentation, what we'd also like to see a diversity in players, diversity in products, and a diversity in approaches as well. We're honestly very happy to see that there's a domain that's really emerging. There are other players in dairy as well. We each have our own approach, and for us, it shows that there is a real demand, that there is a real need, and that this is a valid solution. I mean, we knew it, but it's always comforting to have other people, being there with us. So it's taken some years. The first company that was producing dairy products through precision fermentation was created in 2014. And then the next wave started, more like 2019 or so, 2018. So it took some time, and now there are, more that are coming along. But yeah, for us, it's really a new wave that's built upon the previous wave of just fermentation. I mean, people have been, making, yeast for bread, for beer, for many, many years. This is, again, we're dependent on an industry that is already flourishing. We're just adding on these new applications.
You're talking a lot in terms of the offer, but do you see also that in the demand of these products the demand
has been skyrocketing. My associate, she was actually hired years ago to contact these companies and say, hey, we have this new field coming up. What do you think? The beginning, they were a little bit hesitant, and now they come talking to us. Now they say, let's work together. What can we do? They want to try these products. They want to launch these products. This is still biotechnology, so the timelines are a little bit different than a plant-based product. But no, they definitely are wanting to make this change. We're seeing, as you mentioned earlier, public investments from a wide variety of food companies into the space. They're really trying to diversify their risk, create new products. So it's coming from both sides.
And governments actually, they're like investing depending on the governments. The Netherlands, there's pioneer.
Yes, governments as well. Yeah.
They're like Denmark. They're like making like a pretty serious investment on creating and supporting this ecosystem. Germany. I mean, it is a reality. And actually, next week the EFSA, the European Food Safety Authorities, they're having this workshop. They're talking cultivated meat, but they're also talking and discussing with stakeholders precision fermentation, so they are getting ready because it's coming, it's there, and I think you're starting to see movement from different sides. So it's not just an isolated incident only with startups having these really creative ingredients. I mean, we have to think that in some markets it's already consumed.
So you're saying that some states really have a policy, let's say, of supporting.
The Netherlands is very forward-thinking, so I think it was 50 million euros that they invested, working with companies and public research institutions to explore cultivated meat, precision fermentation with a variety of products. They also, for example, I think they have a policy where you can, under particular conditions, you can do public tastings of these products before they're approved. That way you can really start to get consumer feedback, in a controlled environment, of course. That's very unique. We have, in the United States, the Biden administration recently announced, I think it was either 1.2 billion or 2 billion, I can't quite remember, but it's in the billions, dedicated to biotechnology and in infrastructure, and he specifically mentioned, cultured food products. So we're seeing, a lot more, input in that. France as well has had a lot of project calls that specify, alternative proteins, including, products derived from microbes. We've seen that in Europe as well. So we're seeing more and more government support, and like I said, that's really what we need as well. We need the whole ecosystem, and if we're not just to be companies, but public actors as well.
No, it's interesting that there are more than 100 companies. So if 5 of them make, I hope 100 of them make them, but it only takes 5 of them to be successful, and then the whole thing takes off. If you think about it, so the first airplane took off in 1903, the Wright brothers. And only 63 years later, we went to the moon. So it only took the human beings 63 years to make it from just one little jump to the moon. And so things sometimes accelerate extremely rapidly, very quickly. So I'm very optimistic because of this. Now it's kind of slow. Yeah, maybe tomorrow. But it takes just a little bit for the whole thing to produce flavonoids this way. But now it's impossible. Wait 10 years, and then I'm very optimistic.
Yeah, there's something interesting you mentioned about these tastings, which means really bringing in the public, the broader audience, let's say, or consumer landscape from the very beginning. Because here, of course, there is an elephant in the room, which is acceptance. Okay, so we are talking about synthetic biology. And immediately it's very easy to sort of push this subject close to the classical GM food, okay? So let's face this issue, and how would you comment on that? I mean, how is it different from GM food or not, or any comment on that point?
At least in our case, we have the particular advantage of producing bioidentical ingredients. So at the level of their amino acid sequence, they're the same as those produced by cows, which means that the product itself is not considered GMO. The process is, because we are using engineered microbes, but the final product is not. So for the consumer, we can really say they're eating non-GMO dairy identical to dairy that's produced by cows. So, it also has implications, regulatory implications as well, but it really is well for the consumer acceptance. We know that today there is a lot of stigma, about GMO or not, and so we're very happy to be able to offer consumers something today that, has the advantages of, using microbes that have been engineered, but not having the label.
Mm-hmm. Basically, on what you're saying is, well, you have to think that this technology uses the genetically modified microorganism as a processing aid, as a tool to produce a substance or an ingredient that is equivalent to the naturally occurring counterpart. And that's key also from a regulatory point of view, because for the risk assessment it's definitely the best case scenario, because you can show equivalence, and so this is safety. And I'm telling you that this casein is the same, and also GMO, there's like a lot of discussion, and it's proven quite tricky from a technical point of view to show absence of the production strain, like cells and DNA. That's key. I think you have some question there on that, because that's basically the threshold of not having to go through the GMO route and being classified and being able to just be like just a novel food and just have a completely different regulatory route. So yeah, I think those are basically the two key points, like equivalence and no traces of the.
And also, if I'm not mistaken, the US does not regulate, and Europe wants to maybe, perhaps, who knows? No, I've been for 3 years in the EFSA GMO panel, so I know the whole thing. And I'm not supposed to talk about GMOs because they prohibit me from. But yeah, I know that the FDA said, so what? You know, it's identical to the final. And Europe is, well, maybe we'll talk about that tomorrow. You know, it's typical of Europe, of maybe yes, maybe no, and we will discuss.
Yeah. For me to be precise, I understand that here the key point is sort of that the genome modification part is in the process, and then you separate the outcome, okay? So as long as the outcome is bioequivalent or bioidentical, that is, for example, the whole health concerns are sort of cancelled because, you know, it's just the same as you would eat, okay? But does this put some limitation, let's say, to the field? Because, I mean, you may be able of producing things that are not bioidentical, so what do you think about that?
I mean, well, we saw that with Impossible Foods, for example. So for those who don't know, Impossible Foods is a plant-based biotech company based in the United States, and what they did was they identified basically like a heme protein that came from the modules of soy roots. And heme, you know, is really what gives, you know, meat that juicy, you know, texture that makes it red. And what they found was that it's a great source of heme, but they can't isolate it in an economically viable way from soy root modules. So they decided to produce that protein through precision fermentation. Given that it's not a protein that is regularly consumed by humans, it's considered GMO, and so they've had, you know, different regulatory hurdles. It's not available, for example, in Europe. It is in the States. It is as well in Australia and in New Zealand. So it's very geographically segmented. You know, the speed at which these authorizations will occur if you fall under GMO, if you make a new protein that hasn't been consumed, or if you know, as you said, don't meet those criteria for the separation.
Yeah, and exactly. Coming back to the Impossible Burger, this soy legomoglobin in Europe has been on the evaluation process for a long time. They have two authorizations, one for the GMO, and they are like one, I think I remember, for the as a food additive, as an improvement agent. So instead of just having like other plant-based patty or burger, we'll just directly go, or if it's a, I don't know, plant-based isolate, they will just go through the novel food route. But in this case, they're in between, and they're like on the GMO domain, and that's traditional in Europe. It's crop-oriented, it's plant. So I hopefully think, I think that there's going to be changes, because, as you say, there's a lot of limitations depending on the production system. You might need to lysate the cell, or you might not be able to purify so much, so you might have host proteins or host DNA. I mean, we have to think that this is very fine, the threshold that the applicants need to match. So, and again, it's not really, a lot of the argument is not a safety concern as such, because it's just DNA traces, the organism is not viable. But they're still debating, and hopefully we'll see some action there. But this is quite a hot topic, that one. Yeah.
I was thinking out loud. The novel food thing, again, it's a typical example of European inability to decide. So it's called novel food if it's not consumed, I think before was May 1997. 97. But why? No, so krill oil. It's omega-3 from krill oil. Are the same exact molecules as omega-3 from sardines, right? No, it's novel food. Why? Because it was not traditionally. So they set a limit of 25 years, and they call it tradition. And no one knows why. Because if it's too strict, then everything is novel food. If it's too lax, then everything enters the market. So they discussed for many years how to define what's novel food. Again, is coffee novel food? Well, 500 years ago, yeah, oh yes. No, it was just, you could not drink it. But now it is, but now it's traditional. So why 25 years?
Yeah.
It's just
and the 25 years keep on going because we have like a safe,
They keep on going.
safe, so we can just keep on adding years because I think in Singapore they have like 20 years ago. So,
Yeah.
but this one is like a fixed date. I don't know. Yeah.
scientifically it's nonsense.
Okay, so before opening to the floor, start gearing up for your questions. One last question from me was precisely about regulation, whether somehow Europe is ready for this innovation, and what are the main regulatory issues at stake, what are the, let's say, next appointments in the agenda on this topic. Maybe Anna, you can start since you're...
Basically, like coming back to what we were discussing right now, I think the key regulatory issue for this type of proteins, in this case, or products derived from precision fermentation, is basically showing that the GMM is a processing aid and is not present in the final food to avoid falling under the GMO regulation, because currently there's a lot of uncertainty and that results in extended timelines, having to run more studies and having a more or it takes longer time to access markets. So avoid that.
This issue of not having traces.
Yeah, exactly. In the final product, that has a tremendous impact on the authorization, because it basically decided if it's within the scope of novel foods or with the GMO. So in practice is tremendous, even though it's just traces of DNA and the product would be practically the same. From a practical point of view, from a regulatory point of view, this is like a world difference. So, and it's the same with what Maya was bringing up, the equivalence to the natural counterpart. That's like a red line, so to say. The farther you go, the more uncertainty, at least from a regulatory point of view. We were discussing regulators and risk assessors are familiar with this technology and the products, and part of the risk assessment is comparing it to the natural substance. Xenoproteins, for instance, or things a bit more innovative or a little bit more creative. I think those will, that part I don't think we are ready from a regulatory point of view, like authorities. I think it's not reflected in guidances. They are not, they actually did like an assessment of current guidance. Those, I think, from a regulatory point of view, I will try to wait and see.
So in those cases, if a company or whoever comes up with a product of that sort, it would go in the GMO bag, or where?
That's the thing, is for xenoproteins.
Yeah, because they're not.
It's a problem because it's really not, it's not defined. So that's in practice, when something is not defined and they have not experience in it, it will take forever. So, so basically, I think we need to prioritize the products that they are going to have a easier. I don't know.
For those that are not familiar,
they're going to get a little bit more love through the process than the ones that are like a bit more,
For those that are not familiar, what would be the difference between xenoproteins and something that is bioequivalent, or however?
It's basically new to nature proteins. So it's something that you engineer, and so if we already, you mentioned it before, toxicology, allergenicity, and all those parts, that is, we have already like available knowledge and studies that we could use to do the assessment of a casein or like an egg protein.
Okay.
But if it's completely new, how is it going to be digested? The allergenicity is like a big part of it. Like, because you have to think that this is going to be, if it's like a protein substitute, it's going to be in common foods for the common people. So there's a lot of uncertainty around it.
So it's not the case, for example, of impossible food, because in that case it was a protein that existed in nature but was not consumed.
I remember it was a little bit tweaked, I think, but it exists. In this case, it was like because of the DNA.
Okay, fine.
And I mean, it's approved in the States and in Austria, but FSANs
And Maya, Francesco, what do you think? I mean, where do you think the bottlenecks could be in terms of?
Balance between protecting consumers, which is extremely important, and making companies happy. So it's a fine balance of being extremely strict. So okay, it's a joke. It's not a joke, but they told me, a colleague from the GMO panel told me that he had lunch in Brussels, and so they brought a salad with soybeans, and he was having lunch with someone who said, hey, is soybean transgenic? And the waiter says, oh, wait a minute, I'll come back. So he goes to the kitchen, comes back, and he says, no, it's not right, it's not. So I will not eat it, it's not been safely evaluated. It's kind of, I know it's stupid, but GMOs are the only, so let's say today you have a salad. Is it toxic? No, of course not, says who? There are no studies in the salad you have today, or what we had last night, none. Of course it's not toxic, I know very well it's not. But if it was a GMO product, that would have been super evaluated from production, content, and everything. So GMO products are extremely screened, evaluated, scrutinized up to production, presence of DNA, toxicity, allergenicity, or protein. So we should not be scared of that, because we have authorities that really are there to work and make sure that these products are safe. Then again, it might take forever. That's a major issue. It might take forever because we need to protect consumers.
On that?
Yeah, I wanted to add something. It seems like we've been talking a lot about one part of the European regulatory approval process, which is the safety evaluation with the EFSA. There's a second part, which is also very important, which is the vote by the European Commission. Yeah. So all of the member states have the right to, disapprove or to share opinions on whether or not they want it. All of those comments need to be addressed, and so that is something where we talked about the need for communication. That's where that comes in. It's really important that people understand the benefits of what we're offering, because if they don't, they're just going to say, okay, this is some new technology, like you said, the Burke factor. So it's really that's where this comes in, and we know that we've seen that part is also very long. So there's in the States, for example, they don't have that political vote. It's just the safety evaluation. Europe is very particular in that. So there's this two-step process, and both can have delays depending on how well the product is known, how well the benefits are understood, depending on, of course, all the safety mentions that you've brought up. So it's more complex.
Great, thanks a lot. Thanks for bringing that up. Okay, so now I would open the questions to the floor. I think there is a mic. Can you, thanks, Waltraud. Whoever had any comment, remark, question for the panel? One there. Well, on the second row.
Thank you, very interesting. I'm a microbiologist from the University of Oviedo in Spain. So regarding nutraceutical market or novel food markets, in the European Union, the current situation, as you all have described briefly in the last half an hour or so, you can market a protein or a nutraceutical compound or another molecule independently of the origin being GMO or not, as far as the final product mimics the natural counterpart. Is that right?
Also, it's not preventing more innovative products to be approved. It's just what we were talking is like, from a practical point of view, it will take longer, but yeah, this is correct.
In your case, Maya, your casein or the lactalbumin or whatever proteins you are producing in your bacterial or microbial factory has no problems from the regulatory point of view to be entering the market.
Right now, that's something that will be defined, of course, by the authorities when we have our file that's fully submitted. We won't have that GMO roadblock, as we said, that would put us in a longer path to reach the market. But we still, of course, as you mentioned, we'll undergo all of the safety testing for our production, so that, as you said, consumers can eat our products and know that it's been validated and 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 is safe. So there's, I would say, it's just an easier path because we're not going the GMO route, for the GMO labeling regulatory route, but we still have to go through the regulatory pathway.
It is a centralized and very thorough process by EFSA, that is the scientific body, and is subdivided by different committees of scientists and experts, so each of them will really scrutinize and dissect the dossiers that you put together. So before a product is placed on the market, it needs to go through this really, really detailed evaluation by experts. So, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, any other question? Comment here?
Hello, thank you for the conversation. Has been very inspiring. So, if I understood more or less correctly, so in future food there are two different important concepts. So, the first one is sustainable food or more sustainable food. This is the food that Maya is providing. So, traditional food, but produced in a more sustainable way. So this is okay for the regulation point of view, so the people is happy with that. But I think that is much more important is the second concept is to create novel food. So, because basically we are mimicking, the traditional food. Is that the sample of tomato is very, because probably the first tomato is novel food. I don't know how to cook the tomato. But so in the future probably it's not enough with produce sustainable food. We need to create novel food, novel flavor, taste, and this is so right now constrained by regulation, or there are technical limitations as well. So
yeah, I think that's a really, really good question, and I think it depends what we consider completely novel. Something that, as Francesco was saying, something that is not been used in Europe before 1997. Let's say, for example, I think those are novel because they are novel sources of nutrients. For example, biomasses and mycelia. I don't know, there might be like microorganism or micro or filamentous fungi that we have not been consumed, or the process to extract, I don't know, the protein has not been consumed before. So it is novel as such, and it is like a novel, nutritious and sustainable way of feeding or ingredients. So I think there's not a blockage as such. The blockage we were talking about it is from bioengineering new to nature proteins or substances. We can look around, as we've been doing so many other times, and just say, okay, but this algae is producing this really valuable, nutritious oil, or this, I don't know, mushroom or fungi. So those are new sources, and they definitely have, they're part of the landscape, and they're like a really, really important part, and they're currently evaluated by the authorities too. Yeah, so we hope to see them in the market soon.
What I've heard is that's really challenging is making sure that if you introduce anything novel, that consumers know what to do with it. Yeah. If you give them, we've seen this a lot in the plant-based space, where you might say, okay, here's a new creamer, or here's a new vegan cheese, but if you want it to melt, you have to use vapor, or or you have to put it in the middle of the lasagna. It won't melt on the top. They don't understand it. They don't know how to do it. It doesn't work like their usual food. So that's why that's why all these companies are working so hard to mimic, if you want to use that word, what we have is also just for ease of adoption. It's not even just the question of taste, it's just, do they know how to cook? I mean, today, a lot of people don't. And so if then it's a whole new thing, and, if you're talking about a new oil and it doesn't cook the same way, or it doesn't, a new, egg replacement and it doesn't act like an egg, consumers just don't get it. And so that's, that comes back to the education and, really, accompanying all these people in this transition. That's also up to companies as well to, teach them, okay, what can we do? How to, influencers who are, showing recipes, etc. But it's a full spectrum of, at the end of the day, this is all about end consumers, right? So they need to know how to eat them.
Yeah, we are putting a lot of focus on the challenge of this aspect, but sometimes it could be seen also as an opportunity because, gastronomical innovation is a big thing, in cooking and that part. Although it's true that then to scale it up, knowing what to do, based on my personal experience, I can confirm that is crucial, of course, because you have a limited amount of time, let's say, to learn and use. Any other comment, question? Yep.
I'm really enjoying the conversation, and I wonder, and it's a little bit of follow-up of the previous question, I wonder, let's put aside all the regulatory aspects and imagine, they're all solved. So what are the next challenges? Or, in other parts of the world where we don't have these European regulatory challenges with regarding to this specific food, how far has it developed there, and why is it not completely implemented there already? I'm thinking of the US or China or wherever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, one prime example is Singapore. So Singapore has significantly invested into alternative proteins, whether we're talking about public research or regulatory aspects, or enabling companies to come. They even have financial incentives for companies to do their R&D on the territory. All of that is for food sovereignty, which is also something that Europe is interested in, and that's another advantage for us to push this domain forward. So that was the first country and it's the only country to have approved the sale of cultivated meat. So they were really the pioneers worldwide, and going through that, creating a regulatory process and allowing for that to happen. In the United States, we have egg proteins produced by microorganisms. We have meat proteins produced by microorganisms. We have a dairy protein produced by microorganisms that are on the market. Of course, there's questions of scale as well, and that's going to take time for, like any company to grow. Like I said, this domain is quite new. So, as the consumers, continue to understand, as the companies continue to scale, we're going to see more and more of these products, across geographies. And again, that's in parallel with, these market authorizations, that we're seeing, as well, and, in India, and, in Singapore, and in other parts of Asia. Yeah.
So you can find them in supermarkets. In the United States, you can find...
Yes, I've had, ice cream made with beta-lactoglobulin that was produced by a filamentous fungi. Yeah. I bought it at my local, a local grocery store. It was at a similar price to other vegan or other ice creams, like the kind of, yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we're getting there slowly, but yeah, it's also just the domain is quite young, so it will take time for all these companies to scale. But that's why we really see the benefits of being a B2B, because we can work with these large companies who already have significant distribution and marketing, and who can help bring these products to consumers faster. That's really the goal, is that it gets in the hands of people, and we can all reduce the environmental impact of what we eat.
There.
Yeah, hello. Thanks for the discussion. Tobias Goris from the Nature Group here. What I missed a little bit in this discussion, it's very European, Western centered, right? But aren't the major advantages not in producing novel, sustainable food, especially for developing countries?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
That's
a good point. Yeah. Well, I can take that one. Actually, a lot of countries that they might not have such a complex system or as Europe, right? Like to evaluate new products, they follow and they look at Codex and FAO guidance. And actually they're developing cultivated meat, and so they're actually developing good code guidances and risk assessment guidances that some emerging economies might adopt and integrate if they are willing to do the assessment, or they're incentivizing the production. I think to be honest, like I'm more familiar of the countries that they are like investing in this type of products. As I see it, I think we need to, I don't know, like perhaps scale up a little bit more the production of certain ingredients and substances to be able to export maybe the technology and the resources, because that's the whole idea, because a lot of these ingredients can be produced regardless of the weather or the other rainfall or other circumstances that might be limiting in some harsher areas that they are, like, I don't know, exposed to drought or things like that. So I do think it's really important to keep in mind that the potential projection of these alternative ways of making food are basically, as you mentioned before, food sovereignty, and that it might be important in places where actually have scarce resources. So
it's a great point. It's a great point you made. Imagine if you can supply the diet or supplement the diet of developing countries with flavonoids, inexpensive and produced locally in Kenya. I don't know why I'm saying Kenya, but you know, or Indonesia, whatever. That's, I think it's a great opportunity that should be addressed internationally by the United Nations. But I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. We're seeing, you know, for example, you know, India has just approved precision fermentation dairy protein. China included in their 5-year plan that they want to support cultivated meat, and so they're, you know, really developing again these regulations for it and other cultivated products. You know, you mentioned, you know, the goal, of course, is that we can produce as locally as possible. Of course, we need to think about what we're feeding as well, these microbes, and so, you know, although, you know, we do believe that microbes will have a stronger ability to be transplanted in other places, you know, where we, for example, couldn't have milk, or, you know, but we still have to think about what we're feeding the microbes. The goal is not to produce somewhere and then, you know, import as much as possible what we're feeding them. It's still to you know, create a more sustainable system. So, you know, we know that really, as going back to kind of what you said, you know, yes, we're talking a lot about these, you know, the countries today that are, you know, in more Western, but we're seeing in those developing countries, we know that they want to eat what we're eating today. They want to eat these animal products. So we still have to think of this focus of providing these, you know, equivalent products to those people, hopefully producing as locally as possible, but, you know, targeting those products in particular to start.
There is another dimension to it, that nothing of this will work unless there is a lifestyle change, first of all in developed countries and massively, but also that maybe developing countries find their own way to development that doesn't repeat the mistakes. But anyway, you had additional comments maybe?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Like you said, you know, all these countries are developing their regulatory systems. You know, like you said, are looking for inspiration in other countries. You know, the China's recent 5-year plan that's quite new. And you know, other countries have had these regulations in place. So we're seeing more and more, you know, countries saying, okay, let's go towards this. Let's make things clear. You know, as you said, if it's not clear, it takes longer. You know.
And also, I think one other important thing to bear in mind is that let's say the deeper concerns on GM food were not related to the fact that you got ill if you ate them, but were more related to food sovereignty. You know, to the fact that you have these patented seeds that are then sold to developing countries. So maybe one important take-home message would be, as you do the tastings with, you know, with people in Paris or in the Netherlands, whatever, maybe it would be good for this sector to think from the very beginning about, okay, how we do this at a global scale in a way that it's fair, that we're not just reproducing an old colonial thing with a new technology. So thanks a lot for bringing this up.
Thanks. Yeah. Add something too. In the case of milk, for example, milk is a liquid product. And we produce powdered ingredients, which also enables us to, send these products, to places where they can't, make these cheeses in the same quantities because they can't deal with the transport of this liquid, perishable material. So there are also other advantages that we could imagine, from this way of producing these ingredients that would allow us to access new markets that today are inaccessible.
Yep, thanks for an excellent discussion. How do you see, this is an open question to all panelists, but how do you see future food or present food, because it's already happening, affecting the overall price of food, both in the commodity market and niche markets? Because price is oftentimes the critical factor driving purchase decisions and ultimately consumer acceptance.
Price is, is key. We know that, as you said, people generally they purchase by price and taste, and convenience. Those are kind of the three pillars of food. So really, everything we're doing is going towards that and making sure that we're going to produce, affordable products, affordable and healthy, products for consumers. So, of course, as I mentioned, scale up will affect, which market exactly that's in at which time, but yeah, that's really the goal.
I agree. Price is the major driver of food purchase. Even though people do not believe it, or they will never tell you, but once they go to supermarkets or to a shop, the price is the #1 driver. It's not the only one, of course, and the commodity issue is a major issue, major problem in the whole food industry, because everything is becoming a commodity. Sugar, they don't make any money with sugar, it's a commodity. Coffee, now it's a commodity. Olive oil, now unfortunately it's a commodity. Salt is a commodity. So it's very difficult to find a food item that you can sell or you can exploit to make money. But in this case, I'm more optimistic, because the so-called millennials, there's a whole category of people, they call themselves climatarians. So they eat we choose what they eat based on the impact on the planet. So if we can convince them that what they produce has a lower or a smaller footprint, environmental footprint, maybe they will be able to pay, maybe they will be willing to pay a little bit more for a product that does not impact the planet as much as the one next to it. So again, it's a way of communicating the benefits of eating certain foods. Even though they might be a bit more expensive, they have less impact on the planet, they might be better for your health, blah, 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 whatever. I think I think communicating this issue, it's super important. And maybe Miguel is right, they need to start right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course. I mean, the earlier you start, the better, of course. I mean.
And then the technology and also like the enables, as you say, it gets more mature and more established. That will reduce cost of production.
Maybe if I can have a personal thought, since I am the outsider in the room, the whole issue of price of food is really crazy, because it doesn't match at all with things like health, how healthy the food is, and a lot of other dimensions. So, I mean, I'm not sure that the objective should be make these things very, very cheap if the rest of the market doesn't change. I mean, if you are competing with, very cheap junk food, okay? Maybe it's a matter of redistributing everything, because also if you make these things extremely widely accessible, you will produce obesity or have other side effects. I mean, not because it would happen the same if they were, standard milk or whatever, So yeah, it's a big question. So thanks for bringing it about.
And just going back, you talked about understanding the environmental or the benefits of the product, in particular the environmental benefits. It also means educating consumers on the difficulties, associated with the animal-based products. I mean, today, I don't think most people know that cheese is the third biggest greenhouse gas emitter per kilo after beef and lamb. So it's actually, it emits more greenhouse gases than pork and chicken. And it's the largest, it's the first water consumer out of all food per kilo, just because, you know, cheese is a very inefficient process. You need 10 liters of milk for 1 kilo of cheese. So even just communicating, okay, what's the animal equivalent? Where does that stand? And then what is this new equivalent? You know, how much more efficient is it? You know, in resource utilization, in the greenhouse gas emissions, et cetera. And you know, we have seen, you know, companies communicating on that already, and you know, that does seem to speak to people. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm afraid, unfortunately, the time is almost over. Unless there is any final remark, I would thank the panelists. I mean, it was really, really very inspiring. I have plenty of notes for things to follow up. I think maybe if I can, there are so many take-home messages that it's impossible to make a summary, but I will focus on the ones that are more related maybe to my field, which is communication. I mean, we have had this very interesting insight about, you know, acting early with the stakeholders, with society in general, not only society in developed countries, but also in developing countries. That would definitely be an important thing, and not only really as a strategic move, but really in order to have a bi-directional communication, to hear what the public has to say, because certainly these technologies have a big potential for providing solutions to health and climate challenges and food waste and a lot of variety of challenges. But this must be done together with the public, with the audience, with the consumers, and yeah. So I think events like this one, this sort of debates contribute to this objective. And so thanks again to the organizers, Synbio4flav, and thanks again to Maya, Francesco, and Anna. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us in here. Thank you.